Hello there, my name is Daniel Chacon, and for my final exam project in our music appreciation class, I have chosen the Russian composer and pianist by the name of Nikolai Medtner. Nikolai Medtner was born in Moscow, Russia, in 1880, and was one of 6 children in his family. He and his older brother are more well known compared to the rest of his siblings, but to begin, his childhood life was quite simple, and I suppose what one would almost wish to have. His musical talent was noted and almost admired by his family when he was a child, and it was actually his mother who had taught him how to play the piano, and so she was the one who had instructed him right around until the age of 10, where he started to learn on his own in a way. It was kind of mixed, learning on his own and with his mother. And in 1894, at the age of 14, he had enrolled in the Moscow Conservatory and had learned many things, including counterpoint, under Paul Pabst, who was actually a student of the well-known Franz Liszt. As he studied, he was known very well for his skill. He was quite strict with himself, and he wanted to perfect everything that he could, in a way. He did not really enjoy experimenting, and this philosophy stood out with him, and it actually carried on into his later years, and he stuck by it for the rest of his life. He was so talented and excelled so much farther than his peers that after learning from 4 different teachers, a multitude of different things, he was considered or called the next Sergei Rachmaninoff, or Rachmaninoff, who is another well-known artist. And so when he graduated 4 years later in 1900, he had graduated with the gold medal, which is that school's award that they give out for the best pianist, and he had also earned the Anton Rubinstein Prize. When he had left, he was offered many different positions, and his family suggested he do this as well. But he was offered many positions to be a performer and perform other people's music. But as I said before, he did not want to do this, and so he opted and stood firm with the idea that he wanted to compose his own music, which is partly the reason why he is not anymore in this day, but back in his day, leading up to his death, he was somewhat obscure and not really known that well. But after his death, and especially now, his music is widely loved, and though a little lesser known, it is still studied because of the technical traits of his work, and it's some high level compositions that he had that are practiced to this day. They were considered demanding in some points, just because of how talented he was and how not many could keep up. So he decided that he wanted to be a composer, and so he started composing some of his own works, some sonatas, some solo piano works, and things of that sort. And after the Russian Revolution, he started moving around Europe. Prior to this, he had married, a very nice woman who was a violinist, and she actually, the story is quite interesting. This woman was initially married to his older brother, and it was only after a few years, whenever both of them realized that they had feelings for each other. And so they both confessed to his older brother what was going on and how they felt for one another, and though they never were adulterous or anything of that sort, and his older brother's wife was never unfaithful to him, he seemed to have understood after some time, and in a way he got over it, I suppose you could say. But for the both of them, the older brother was always there, almost in between them, and even on Nikolai Medtner's grave, there lies his older brother's urn. And this older brother died in 1939. So even in their later years, Nikolai and his wife, they still had remembrance of the brother. But for them, I suppose everything had worked out just fine. So taking a step back, Medtner had moved to Berlin in 1921, and the cost of living was quite high, and considering that he was a lesser-known composer, he wasn't making much money. And then in 1924, 3 years later, he had moved to France, specifically for the lower living costs, which is quite understandable. And here and there, he would almost pick up these side jobs where he would compose some works, and he would make a little bit of money, but he wasn't anything too famous or anything. He wasn't too popular at that time, and so he still struggled with making ends meet and getting money. I know that his wife had worked, and so she was almost the steady income in the household, or the one with the steady income in the household compared to him, but he was firm in what he was doing, and he and his wife were both faithful in him, that he would, in a way, make it big, for lack of a better word. And so, after they had moved to France, and they had lived there for a little while, he would pick up these kinds of side jobs, and then it was in 1935, quite a long while afterwards, they had moved to London, which is where they had settled, actually. And he died in 1951 there in London. His house is still standing. He's got a place in the graveyard wherever it was in London, and so now he is, in a way, known pretty well as one of the greater Russian composers and pianists. So World War II had come around by then, or afterwards, and his health had started to really decline, for a lack of a better word. He, because he didn't have that much money, he wasn't able to get too much treatment, and as the years kind of go by, naturally the human body starts to get weary and tired, and you could see this in his writings and his later compositions, and you can almost feel frustration, for a lack of a better word, in his writings, especially when he would have to write and compose new pieces, and they weren't going as he had wanted to. I'll speak about this in a little bit, which is, there's a important and pretty interesting fact here about this, but to continue on, he kept this whole side gig kind of lifestyle up, and he taught other people, so things were looking better in a way, and London was more of a it was a better place for him to live. There were more job opportunities there, and so he had made one of his most famous works, the third piano concerto in 1943, and this was played in the Promenade concert, and this is kind of where he started to become more known to the public eye. He was seen more, and others had thought of him finally. And so once he started to get a little bit more famous, but it wasn't really anything too grand at this point yet, the ruler of Mysore, which is in India, The ruler is called the Maharaja. He had wanted him to play. He wanted to hear him play. And this ruler was an amateur pianist himself, funny enough. And so he really respected Medtner. And he respected how Medtner wanted to keep authenticity in his work and keep things original. He enjoyed the strictness, but he also enjoyed the technical demand that was in the work of Medtner. And so it was almost entertaining for the ruler to try himself to play these things that were so intricate and so detailed. And even in the recordings today that we have, if one were to search this up on the internet and watch somebody play his works, these pianists look as if they're struggling because of how intricate it is. But though the work is so intricate, when you hear it, it sounds so simple, I guess one could say. It is so elegant, it's so romantic, and there's deep thought in it. And I'll discuss this in a bit. But to continue, there were some orchestras and whatnot made for Medtner, who had played specifically his works. And so as the time had kind of went by, he decided to write many songs and sonatas and chamber music as well, which is music that is played by a chamber, in quote, which is a small group of people who can play a certain instrument, who can fit in a room to get an idea of what chamber music is like. And so he wrote 3 concertos with the Philharmonia Orchestra, who were this orchestra of the Maharaja, and he was quite close with them, and he had worked with them for years, and he had not only composed but performed this work. And so this is where his social status started to climb just a little bit more. Again, nothing too elegant, nothing close to royalty or anything of that sort, but when one is considered as lesser known, but then is picked out of the crowd by the ruler of a region in a new country, that is when eyes start to fall on you. And this is what had happened for Nikolai. He continued to do this kind of a thing with the orchestras and whatnot, and he wrote many to answer the questions on the types of forms and ensembles and characteristics that he had used. He wrote a lot of sonatas, chamber music. There were some fugues and concertos and some variations. And he composed a lot of his work for solo pianists. He also did some for orchestras and, again, chamber ensembles. But the key thing to note is that the majority of his works all had a piano playing in it at one point or another. This was really his skill set. This was what he enjoyed to do, what he liked to have, and he really enjoyed having the piano in his work. And so his work was very, again, intricate and detailed. It had a whole lot of emotion and was very romantic, which kind of makes sense considering the time period that it was in, which is the Romantic period or so. He actually served as a bridge between the Romantic period and that kind of a tradition and their style of music to the 20th century. So he was a bridge for these two centuries, and was this is what his contribution was, I suppose. He really kept things flowing well, not only his music, but in his music there was a lot of structure. It was considered to be very disciplined and strict, and in quote, some people called it demanding. He did not write and compose music like many others who were experimenting. Similar to how Tchaikovsky wrote the Swan Lake Ballet as really an experiment and just kind of a Hail Mary in a sense, where he just decided to take a swing at the whole ballerina or ballet game, I guess you could say. And so he did not do this. He did the opposite. He had something that he had focused on, and he worked really to perfect that technique and keep as many things organized as possible. He was very rigorous with these kinds of a thing. And somewhat mentioned before, he had some controversy come up, actually, because many people had seen his work or had heard about it, and they believed that he, as they say, thought with his fingers. His work was so intricate that they believed that it was almost impossible for somebody to think of these kinds of things in their heads, so they believed that he was really improvising. He would just start on the piano and start playing whatever he wanted, and whatever sounded good he would put on paper, and maybe work around with that and play some things, play a little bit with that. But this was not true, because whenever people had found his actual sheet music that he had written himself, they had seen that he had been erasing things and changing things constantly, and so he was very hard on himself, and it was proven that he didn't even touch the piano until the piece that he was writing was perfect in his eyes. And so once he died in 1951 in London, due to old age, he was in his 70s. Once he died, his work started to surface in a way. All of his works show talent and skill, even at this age. And there was a whole lot of emotion, even in this failing health. And he still had, in a way, joy for what he was doing, which somewhat fits in with the Romantic time period themes, I guess you could say. All of his works were recorded, and some were recorded many times, and they're loved by so many due to the originality and the emotion. There's a whole lot of lush harmonies and textures with his work. And so his most popular work is his number one piano sonata, opening 38. It's called Sonata Reminiscenza, which means like reminiscing. And so this one is a singular moving sonata that's got rondo structure characteristics in it, where the music almost cuts from one feeling to a new, back to the original, to a new one, and back to the original, and back to the first quote-unquote new one. And this was called an episode. And so there were many episodes in this. And this specific work sounds very, in a way, bittersweet, where it stops to explore these deeper and darker emotions, and then it comes back to lighter and calmer emotions, and there's some excitement and crescendos, and it's almost a roller coaster in a way, but it flows super smooth. And the main theme is almost like a dream, as many say. It's not foggy, but it's almost as if one were to really try to look back in their past. This is kind of the music that they might think of. In this particular, in this sonata, it is 15 minutes long, and at the 9 and 12 minute mark, I think this is where it holds the most excitement and emotion, and maybe as he was writing this, he was joyful and feeling love with this. And it starts homophonic, and then moves to polyphonic things, utilizing arpeggios, where where his left hand plays these almost rolling kind of parts or patterns, where it feels like there's almost a setting to the music or a background of sorts. And to finally speak about his legacy, he influenced many and encouraged originality. He was loved by so many, and still is still studied because of the technical skill and just the high level of his works. Again, he was considered as a bridge between the Romantic period and its traditions to the 20th century. And though he didn't form a new style or anything of that sort, he did help pianists grow their music and their skills, and their authenticity. And he impressed many as the work was great, but he was firm on composing compared to performing, and he stressed the importance of originality and integrity over the trends, which ensures timelessness, which is very true in this case. And though he was lesser known, he was still acknowledged as extraordinary, and most likely will be forever. Thank you.